In this video, I'm going to look at properties of radicals. So the first thing before we get started though is just to talk about a radical. So a radical is any term that has this radical symbol in it. Notice this small little n that kind of goes in the left hand corner of the radical. That's called our index. And then the number or stuff underneath is what we call the radicand, and you can kind of think of it as our base, but the proper term is radicand. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is adding and subtracting radicals. We can only add and subtract radicals when our index and our radicand are the same. We won't be able to add and subtract radicals when they're not the same. Now, in the case where they are the same, we're going to add and subtract them just like we do with like terms. So when you have 3x plus 2y plus 5x, well, in this case we can add like terms, so 3x plus 5x is 8x, but we can't add the 2y because it's not a like term. Radicals are going to act the same way as that. So for instance, in this first example, I have 5 square root of 41 minus 3 square root of 41 plus 2 times the cube root of 17 plus 4 times the cube root of 17 plus 1 times the cube root of 41. Well, if we follow the properties of adding and subtracting radicals, you'll notice that I have an index, I have a square root of 41 and a square root of 41, so those are the same index and same radicand. So I can make this 2 square root of 41. So I can combine those two. And then if I look here, I have the cube root of 17 and the cube root of 17, so I can combine these two terms. Well, if I take 2 plus 4, that's really just 6 times the cube root of 17. I've used those two. And then lastly, I have plus 1 times the cube root of 41. Now, if I look at these three terms, you'll notice that I have 2 times the square root of 41 plus 6 times the third root, or the cube root of 17, plus 1 times the cube root of 41. Notice that none of these terms have both the same index or the same radicand, right? The first one's got a radicand of 41 and the last one's got a radicand of 41. But notice that the indexes don't match up, so we can't combine them. If I look at the second one and the last one, they have the same index but different radicand, so we can't add or subtract them because they're not the same. So remember, to add and subtract radicals, both the index and the radicand must be the same.